Welcome to Beyond the Comfort Zone Live.
This is the show where we push leaders to step beyond their comfort zones, challenge their thinking, and accelerate their success.
I'm Aviva Lebo.
And I'm Renee Klein.
As Vistage chairs, we've seen firsthand how powerful it is when high caliber leaders come together to push beyond their limits.
Because no matter how much experience you have, you don't know what you don't know. When you're at the top, getting honest, unbiased feedback is tough, and spotting your own blind spots is even tougher.
That's where the magic of peer groups comes in. Our mastermind style groups aren't just about networking, they're about real collaboration, a space where leaders challenge each other, hold each other accountable, and unlock growth that they never thought was possible.
And that's what this show is about, too. Every episode, we explore ideas, challenges, and leadership breakthroughs to help you make smarter decisions and scale your impact.
So if you're ready to think differently, stretch your limits, and take your leadership to the next level,
Then you're in the right place. Let's go beyond the comfort zone.
our guest today is Tara Heaton. Tara is a writer, speaker, and master storyteller. By applying over 25 years of sales and leadership experience and almost 20 years of the study of neuroscience, Tara created her platform, Talk to the Brain. With her understanding of how brains process information in today's overstimulated world, Tara helps clients tell better stories and communicate for greater impact. Tara never planned to underpin her communication strategies with neuroscience. In 2005, her 12-year-old daughter, Caroline, contracted a rare virus that led to a seizure condition, causing gradual and significant brain damage. What began as research to stop Caroline's seizures became a lifelong study of neuroeconomics, the brain as it relates to memory, human behavior, emotions, and communication. Today, Tara's work is devoted to the biological evidence that authentic human connection is paramount to strong teams, growing revenue, and joyful individuals. Tara says the biology of joy is a 10 times performance factor created by building trust and connection. So without further ado, we'd like to welcome Tara to the show. Tara, thank you for being on Beyond the Comfort Zone.
Thank you for that wonderful welcome. I'm excited to be here.
Um, well, I have to, to start off is really understanding why you're so passionate about storytelling, since that's where we're going today.
Yeah. So storytelling, um, I'll tell you a story. Uh, a strategic business partner of mine hears me talk very often about conducting storytelling workshops. And one day we're having coffee and he's like, I got to tell you, Tara, I just don't get it. What is the big excitement around storytelling? And this is simply put why I'm so excited about it. Because storytelling is the one skill, that the single skill that I can think of that has multiple factors of growth for individuals, for teams, internally and externally. And that's the key. So when teams are able to learn to tell stories, they build trust, they build connection, and they build performance internally. And at the same time, they're learning a skill for external communications. So presenting, negotiating, networking, and that all comes from the ability to share a story in a clear, memorable manner. So that's why I'm so excited about it.
I, I love that. And do you find, Tara, that people have a hard time translating that skill to business growth?
On the outset, some do. It's becoming more and more popular, as you know. People see
Mhm.
the power in it. But I think what people are looking for now is a little bit of a misnomer as people think like, we need to learn to tell our story. They
Mm.
think like, okay, we got our story, it's on our website, it's part of our pitch. Check that off and we're done. That's not what storytelling truly is about. It is
Mm.
about sharing our lived experiences in such a way that they're relatable to other people so that we can grow together.
Mm.
So if you're in a negotiation setting, for example, or sales, rather than trying to persuade someone or convince them, you may share something that's relatable to them that builds trust and
Mm.
helps the person to come to that conclusion on their own.
Love that.
Tell us more a little bit about the context of um, how that storytelling works. Like you say, like it builds relationship and trust, but what does that look like? What types of stories are you telling?
Well, typically, like if I'm conducting a workshop, and a lot of folks, they just kind of want to skip over this part and get to the work that will help them build the ROI. But until we experience firsthand the power of story, we'll never be as compelling a storyteller as we hope we
Mm.
might be. So, what that looks like is first, forgetting any rules, forgetting about any type of strategy or structure. I teach all that. We just learn to share experiences that where we are able to discover what we learned from those experiences. Something when we were young, something when we were first getting married, something disappointing, a winning moment. So I take teams through those type of workshops that really builds connection and they are experiencing the power of story. Then we introduce structure, we introduce
Mm.
strategy, techniques, and coaching.
Mhm.
What surprises you most, Tara, when you start with folks just telling stories about their personal life? And then I know you get to the strategy for business. What surprises you most when you experience different teams in that environment?
Let me think about that for just a minute. I think one of the most surprising things is that folks who have no interest in growing their vulnerability gene
Mm.
are typically the ones that grow the most in these workshops.
Yeah.
They see how easy it can be. Rather than talking about our emotions and our concerns and
Mm.
our fears, when we learn to share experiences, those words are not nearly as necessary. So
Mhm.
it builds connection for people who I think maybe didn't even stop to consider that vulnerability as a part of it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What types of teams can benefit from your workshops?
Right now, the teams that I'm working with most often that are really benefiting from it are really in two categories. One is nonprofit, in the nonprofit world, because nonprofit folks wear so many hats. They're all partly in charge of getting dollars in the door. The other teams are marketing and sales. And the reason for marketing and sales is because they get that win-win. They're building a more cohesive team. They're developing their leadership and they're learning to communicate stories that will help to close sales.
Tara, what are the most common mistakes you help your clients with?
Oh, that's a juicy question. Let me think about this for a minute. So I mentioned this, but I want to expand on it just a little bit. I think so many times in the world of sales, we and growing our business, whatever that sales conversation might look like, we are focused on convincing someone or changing their mind or persuading them. And it feels like a push, 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 almost like we're going to debate somebody. And when people learn to share an experience that is
Mm.
relatable to the emotion that's keeping the person from making that decision, again, it builds a connection and makes the sale so much more seamless. So
Mm.
that's one of the things that I see folks do in presentations. What I didn't share is storytelling is part of one of my services is to help people with sales presentations, especially pitches, trying to get investors, trying to earn sales, and stories are a part of that. So rather than just trying to hit people with enormous amounts of data and logic, stories make it human and relatable, which again builds revenue through building trust. Another
Mm.
big mistake that I see people make often is they over explain.
Mm.
And when we tend to do that, what happens is the mind of the listener becomes completely overloaded. Our
Mm.
brains today are trying to constantly conserve energy because the brain today fears two things. The brain fears complexity and boredom. The
Mm.
brain wants that sweet spot where the dopamine is just enough to keep us alert, but not overwhelmed. But what presenters oftentimes will tend to do is just start shooting as much information as they possibly can, hoping that something will stick and just convincing with more logic and more data. When the real goal is connection and learning how to listen to your audience. There are ways to listen to audiences of 200. And what people want is to be heard and understood before they would ever consider changing their mind. So,
Mm.
again, too much information, not enough connection. And I'll share one more. And this one has been a lot of fun for me to help people with because, interestingly enough, I say that when people learn to overcome this mistake, they get more in their comfort zone. So I like this conversation for you all because you're talking about getting out of the comfort zone, which I'm totally an advocate of. But in communication, we need to make other people feel comfortable, especially when it comes down to growing revenue. And so what I see a lot of folks do is they try to present perfection. They
Mm.
want to have all the answers, even if they're not sure. They may kind of fake it till you make it mentality, um, present themselves as if they know all the answers to all the questions, and that whatever they're offering is perfect. And that does not build trust. When we let folks see our struggles as part of our story, that's where the connection is built, not in those winning
Mm.
moments, but in those struggling moments. So if there's something about our service or a company that we feel like isn't perfect, to share that is much closer to building that signature on an agreement than it would be if we just try to present perfection.
So I'm curious because one thing you hear stories and all of that, and people are getting to know each other. And people, you said this just a minute ago, people like to be heard and listened to. But when you're
Mhm.
telling a story, you're not doing that. I'm curious how that parlays, right? Because if you're talking about yourself, you're not connecting sometimes with them.
Yes, that's an awesome, awesome question. So let me explain. When we tell a story that will be powerful in a business setting, we're telling it because the emotions are relatable. So if someone says, I'm just not so sure that this is for us, rather than trying to convince them with a different data point or a different scenario, what we need to do is share a story, an experience where we can show that person that we understand how they're feeling. So you remind me of myself 10 years ago, for example.
Mm.
I was thinking about making this investment. I had all these fears, and then but there was just this one sentence that kept falling on my heart and caused me to make the right decision. Letting someone know that you know how they feel. That's a great question because one of the things I coach speakers to remember is that when they're presenting, it's never really about them. It's about the
Mm.
listener.
So interesting. And I love what you said there because there's a stark difference between that and what I see people do trying to connect, which is they share a story about an experience that's similar. That's the facts, not the emotions. And what you just said about the emotions makes a ton of sense. So, you're talking about a car wreck. Oh, I was in a car wreck, right? Like versus um, the emotions behind it. So I think that's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it might be helpful really to expand on it just a little bit because when folks think about telling stories, the first thing they go to are testimonials, which are powerful. And those are great stories to have in your back pocket. But we need to be able to share other stories that have those relatable emotions that have nothing to do with business.
Mm.
And that's when a lot of connection can really, truly grow. Like if someone is struggling with holding on to a company, then maybe it's related to holding on to your youngest child before they went off to college or something.
Mm.
See what I'm saying? Like it's those moments that people, when you start to tell a story with that emotional component,
Mm.
you can see people's defenses drop. You can see them relax and ease in. It's almost as if, okay, I'm going to forget for a moment that I'm fighting to win this negotiation and I'm just going to listen to this person share.
Tara, in our work that we do, so much of it's about a safe space and vulnerability. And so it sounds to me like connecting with people, it's more than about what you're presenting, but it's about helping them feel comfortable with you. Are there some tips that you give speakers to create that environment?
Yes, there are a lot of tips. So, and it depends on the audience. And I almost never will give a talk before doing discovery calls. So, if you have a large audience, what you want to do is take some time to have some discovery calls with different members of the audience if you can. So, if you're presenting to, a marketing and sales group of 120, I would ask the VP, I would like to interview 4 or 5 folks.
Mm.
Then you start to pick up their language, what they're facing, their frustrations, and you can take stories that really, really apply to their world in your
Mm.
presentation. This
Mm.
has served me well time and time and time again. And interestingly, people are surprised when I ask to do this. And I'm like, I can't imagine not doing it. Because just like Aviva, you were saying, I mean, if I don't take the time to get to know their world, then I am going to be standing there just talking about myself. It needs to be always about them, the benefit to them. Another example of folks telling stories that so some folks will really like lean into this, okay, I've got this emotional story. And while it might be emotional, if we don't tie it to what that means to me, to the listener, eventually the story is forgotten and no action is taken. So that's in large settings. In smaller settings, it absolutely must be conversational. And what I see a lot of folks do is they understand the power in a conversational collaboration versus just presentation. So they'll ask questions, but they're not really listening for the answer. And I'm sure, you've seen that before, but they're just waiting until it's time to finish the presentation. But when we stop and listen with true, earnest curiosity, it could uncover something that we never dreamed, where there's a great connection.
So shifting gears altogether, um,
Okay.
AI is hot topic these days. We're all using it. And yet at the same time, one of the big fears is it makes us inauthentic instead of more human. And my favorite quote that I heard recently is AI actually makes us more human because it gives us the ability to connect. And so I'm curious, how can people use AI to help them where storytelling isn't a skill, connect
Yeah.
better instead of being inauthentic?
When AI first just, really started to get some legs and everybody was talking about it, I got very nervous because I thought, oh, I'm going to be out of a job. um, but what I have learned is not to fight against AI, but to embrace it. And what that means to me is I lean into AI for efficiency and for inspiration. So rather than giving AI my words and having them correct them, I'll get some of their words and take it and make it my own. I had a friend recently. I wrote an email and he wrote me back, and it was a very, very heartfelt email. And I know without a doubt that he did not write this email. It was beautifully crafted. He hit all the marks of the things he wanted to say. Um, and had I read that a year ago, I probably would have said, wow, I can't believe he put that into AI. Why didn't he just, take the time to write me his own email? But here's the way I take it today. He took the time to tell Chat GPT or whatever tool he was using how much he cared, the points he wanted to make, and AI allowed him to do that. And had he not done that, he may have never taken the time to send me much more than a thanks. It was nice knowing you, Tara. So before we just push it away, I say embrace it and make sure that you make it your own.
I'm so glad to hear you saying that, Tara. That's something that we've learned as well in our work. So that's good to hear you say it and confirm that for us. Now, I do have a question about your TEDx talk. You referenced a term you coined, pleasure stacking. What is pleasure stacking and what should we know about it?
Yeah, so thank you for asking. This is shifting a little bit away from storytelling for sure, but if you watch the TEDx talk, clearly it's full of stories and it has one through line story. And in the beginning, it shares the years early on in my sales career when I was managing a business and managing my daughter's newfound seizure disorder. And I was living on caffeine, nicotine, and cardio and anger. I was her warrior, determined that I was going to do anything I possibly could to stop her seizures. But what I was really doing was distracting and dissociating from heartache.
Mm,
And I bring that up because as I've studied and researched, especially about neurotransmitters and our addiction to dopamine, you know what? We're all doing it. What pleasure stacking is our unbelievable access today to instant gratification, whether it is social media, video games, online shopping, sugar, alcohol, the list goes on and on. And some of those things like cardio, sure, that sounds healthy, but we have a tendency in our culture today to use any of these quick hits of dopamine to give us instant energy, give us pleasure, and we're never reaching what I call true joy. And so I've even gone deeper than just pleasure stacking. There's macro and micro pleasure stacking. And the micro is the sugar or the alcohol or the caffeine or all those little things that just kind of keep us going during the day. But macro pleasure stacking is when we're after that big goal and we become obsessed, so obsessed with it that we're not taking care of what we really value. Mm-hmm. So through my storytelling work, and this is where it kind of all comes full circle, when people learn how beautiful it is to make deep, trusted connection, and we do that through story, they get a sustainable energy that actually drives down their need for those hits of dopamine. When you're really connected with somebody, you get this energy that is more sustainable. It's something called oxytocin. And for men, there's something also called vasopressin. Women have it too, but those energies are much more sustainable than dopamine. And that's why I'm so passionate about storytelling, because it all comes from learning to connect, first at home and then through external communication.
We're talking about a lot about connection. I'm curious, is connection a basic human need?
Well, I'm sure that you know what I'm going to answer to that. Some folks, I'm going to give you a little bit more of my scientific research about this instead of just saying yes, because yes, it is. Humans are wired for connection. And as a matter of fact, there's so many studies about this, but one of my favorite studies started in 1938 at Harvard University, and it still continues today. And it was a study on happiness. And they have done thousands of interviews for people from back in those years, and the study still goes on today. And there's just one single crowning conclusion, and that is the secret to happiness is quality relationships. The one factor that showed the happiest people is because they had quality relationships. Some people will push back on this and they'll be like, I'm an introvert. That's not really what gives me joy. And introverts also need deep connection. I'm an introvert. And what that means is I like those rich, deep, quality connections much more than like a networking cocktail party kind of energy. So to answer your question, we all need that. If we're not getting it from humans, we need to at least get it from pets, and sometimes we can even get it from nature. But in order for us to be physiologically fulfilled, we absolutely need human connection.
Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, my gut said yes, but the science behind it's what I was curious about.
Yeah, yeah.
Tara, you wrote a memoir. And curious, why not a book about your platform, Talk to the Brain? What made you choose the memoir?
Well, I could give you the business answer, and I'm going to give you that too, but there's a little bit more to it. I promised my children years ago that I would make their suffering matter. And the book that I wrote is me keeping that promise to my children. But the book, and this is why I love it for my business, I wrote it in such a way that it's filled with stories, all true, that takes the reader away. And at the end of the stories, they come out of the story having learned something or felt something that they can apply to their own lives. So what I hope is a beautiful example of what I teach, because it is simply a chronological book filled with stories where I am absolutely unapologetically honest. I mentioned the caffeine and the nicotine. I hid that smoking cigarettes habit for years. And I don't smoke cigarettes anymore. I mean, it's been a long time since I did, but that was just a symbol of all that I was really hiding from the world. So those are stories of true honesty and authenticity. It's not just a hardship book. It's not just as people would say, just another whiny memoir. It's filled with joy. And it's an example of storytelling at its best, is my hope.
What's one thing you hope that our listeners take away from this conversation today? The one thing, let's put it that way.
The one thing, and I don't think that I've said this, but storytelling, I see it as art, science, and sport. And I see it as all three of those because certainly it's nuanced and no two stories are alike, just like art. And there's a science to it. There's a good way and a bad way to tell a story, and the bad way is not effective, and that is very much related to brain science. But I also call it a sport because athletes are always honing that skill, always staying on top of their game, staying competitive. And storytelling is something that can continue to grow, to become better and better and better at it. And it can continue to serve our business and our communication. It's a lifelong practice.
Cool.
I love that, Tara. And we have a question for you that we ask everyone when we're with them. What is something out of your comfort zone that you've never done before?
Hmm. I'll tell you something. And it's kind of like a little bit of a bucket list pipe dream, but I've never done it. And that is to do a stand-up comedian's act.
Ah,
I would love to be a comedian, but I don't think that's in the cards. But one of these days, I think I want to have the guts to at least just give it a go.
As a storyteller, you got a head start on that. I have to tell you that one of my clients decided because he wanted to be a better speaker that the best way to do that, rather than taking a normal speech class, was to go take a stand-up improv class and
Okay.
just have some fun with it and have to actually do a performance in stand-up comedy at the end. And it was hysterical and awesome, an amazing experience. So it might be something you want to think about.
Thank you. That is a great tip. I love comedians because they are true artists. I really, really think that they are the great ones.
So. Well, it has been a true pleasure having you on the show today. Learned a lot about storytelling myself and a lot to dive into and think about. To explore more of Tara's work, you can check out her website, her YouTube channel, her TEDx talk that we mentioned earlier. It's titled or Is Our Pleasure Killing Our Joy? As well as her new book, Life Minutes, that chronicles her journey as a business owner who is managing her child's life-altering condition that we referenced before. So thank you so much, Tara, for joining us. It's truly an honor to have you as a guest on our show. And thank you to everyone who has joined us. Until next time on Beyond the Comfort Zone, we encourage all of our viewers to try something new that's outside of your comfort zone because that's where growth occurs and life begins. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.